I, Amelia Preston, heiress to the Preston fortune, stood trembling in a silk negligee, the fabric a stark contrast to the icy rage in my heart. Across the room, my husband, Carlos Blackwell, sneered. $8 million, he drawled, his voice dripping with a mockery that sent chills down my spine. That's the price of your blood, Amelia. This was a far cry from the whirlwind romance that had led me to this gilded cage. Disguised as a struggling artist, I'd fallen for Carlos, his charm as intoxicating as the champagne we'd shared under stolen Parisian nights. But the fairy tale facade crumbled on our wedding night. He'd revealed his true colors, a possessive monster obsessed with the Preston fortune I'd kept hidden. Now, Dorian, his latest mistress, lay critically ill, and Carlos, convinced I was behind it, was demanding a blood ransom. The irony was delicious. He didn't know I, too, was pregnant, the baby lost due to a fall he'd orchestrated. But unlike him, I wouldn't use my pain as a weapon. $8 million, I repeated, my voice surprisingly steady. For my blood? You truly overestimate its value. His eyes narrowed. Don't play games, Amelia. Dorian's blood type is rare, and yours matches. Her life depends on you. A surge of defiance coursed through me. And what about mine, Carlos? What about the life you crushed within me? He scoffed. Lies. You were never pregnant. Anger burned away my fear. You'll see how much I lie when I leave you with nothing. His hand shot out, grabbing my arm. You think you can walk away? The Prestons will never take you back after this scandal. A slow smile spread across my face. You underestimate them, Carlos. And you underestimate me. Suddenly, the bedroom door burst open, revealing Kyle, my childhood friend and now confidant. He'd figured out my predicament and come armed with the truth. The driver's confession, the money trail leading straight to Carlos. His fierce blue eyes locked on mine. Amelia, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You're safe now. Carlos, cornered, lunged for me. Kyle reacted instinctively, a blur of movement that sent Carlos crashing into a wardrobe. Gasping for breath, I stumbled towards Kyle, my heart pounding a desperate tattoo against my ribs. It's okay, he murmured, pulling me into a fierce hug. The scent of his cologne, a familiar comfort, filled my senses. It's over. As the police hauled Carlos away, I leaned into Kyle's embrace, the warmth of him a welcome contrast to the cold grip of fear. There would be a storm to weather with the Prestons, but for now I had safety, a sliver of hope, and maybe, just maybe, something more. In the flickering gaslight, Kyle's gaze met mine, and a spark ignited. A promise whispered in the silence. The gilded cage might be shattered, but perhaps a new love story was waiting to be written. Weeks blurred into a whirlwind of legal battles and family reconciliations. The public devoured the scandal, painting me as the wronged heiress and Carlos, the villain of the piece. The irony was as bitter as the champagne I no longer touched. My days were a symphony of lawyers, board meetings, and the suffocating weight of inherited responsibility. My nights, however, were a desolate landscape haunted by the ghost of my lost child. Kyle, bless his loyal heart, remained a constant presence, his quiet strength a tethered balloon keeping me from drifting away. One evening, exhausted from a particularly grueling session with the board, I stumbled into a small quiet bookstore tucked away on a forgotten side street. The scent of aged paper and leather was a balm to my soul. As I browsed the dusty shelves, I collided with a broad chest, sending a cascade of books tumbling around our feet. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, flustered. A deep chuckle rumbled up from below, making me look up. Mesmerizing blue eyes met mine, framed by a mop of dark hair that defied gravity. "Don't worry about it," he drawled, his voice a warm baritone. "Looks like we both needed a little redirection." He bent down to gather the books, his hands brushing mine as he did. A jolt of electricity shot through me. a sensation I hadn't felt since those stolen nights in Paris before the darkness descended. "You seem troubled," he observed, handing me a book on Renaissance art. "The weight of the world on your shoulders?" I stared at the worn cover, a sudden urge to confess overwhelming me. This stranger, with his gentle eyes and disarming smile, felt inexplicably safe. "Something like that," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He gestured towards a secluded corner where a plush armchair beckoned. "Care to join me for a cup of tea and perhaps a shared literary escape?" Hesitantly, I agreed. As the conversation flowed, I found myself captivated. He was a renowned architect, Ethan Thorne, a name I vaguely recognized from society pages. But he spoke not of buildings or wealth, but of hidden passions and a yearning for a life less ordinary. Hours melted away unnoticed. His passion was infectious, his laughter a melody that chased away the shadows clinging to my soul. Over steaming mugs of Earl Grey, the story tumbled out. The betrayal, the loss, the suffocating grasp of my inheritance. He listened intently, his blue eyes reflecting empathy that made my heart ache. When I finished, a heavy silence settled between us. Then, he reached out, his hand gently cupping mine. "Amelia," he said, his voice a husky caress. "You are strong, braver than you know. But burdens are meant to be shared." His touch ignited a fire within me, dormant for far too long. Leaning closer, I met his gaze, a spark of defiance igniting within me. "Perhaps you'd like to help me share them, Mr. Thorne," I murmured, the words laced with a newfound boldness. A slow smile spread across his face. "Ethan, please. And I'd consider that a privilege, Amelia." His lips met mine, the kiss a revelation. It was urgent, a collision of souls yearning for connection. The bookstore, with its dusty shelves and the gentle scent of forgotten times, faded away. There was only Ethan's warmth, the intoxicating press of his lips, and the promise of a firestorm waiting to be unleashed. He pulled back, his breath ragged. "This is madness," he whispered, his eyes reflecting a desire as fierce as my own. "The best kind," I countered, my voice husky with longing. In the dim, cavernous bookstore, surrounded by stories of love and loss, we wrote a new chapter of our own. His touch was a brand, searing through my silk blouse, sending shivers cascading down my spine. His lips trailed down my neck, igniting a fire that spread like wildfire. The stolen moments in the bookstore were a fleeting dream, a taste of a world where freedom and passion ruled. But as much as I craved him, I knew this couldn't be a simple fling. There was too much at stake, the echoes of my past too raw. The next morning, with a heavy heart, I left him a note, disappearing back into the whirlwind that was my life. Perhaps it was foolish, this reckless dance with an unknown stranger. But for the first time since Carlos's betrayal, I felt a flicker of hope, a newfound determination to claim my happiness on my own terms.